Morning all. I'd like to show you this morning an absolutely brilliant game of Christopher Ward, who's a British Grandmaster. He's an expert in the Sicilian Dragon variation, a variation which was dented in popularity from the Fischer era, with Fischer having some very dramatic wins against the Sicilian Dragon. Nevertheless, Chris Ward challenged the assumptions maybe laid down by Fischer that it was a bad opening, and actually created two well-received books on this variation. And in fact, Magnus Carlsen may have been reading these books because it was reported by Chris that Magnus had told Chris about certain technical variations which were disputed. And in fact, Magnus Carlsen did have some games. There's even a game against Vichy Anand in Sicilian Dragon, which I'd like to show you soon after this game as well. So there's an influence, and maybe Chris Ward was part of that influence on the great Magnus Carlsen for this variation. And this game I'd like to show you exemplifies the kind of resources which are in the Dragon. So let's see, Philip Morris, who's by the way now an international master, I believe, according to ChessGames.com, in Lloyds Bank Masters of 1983, kicked off with e4. Christopher played the Sicilian Defense, and after knight f3, d6, open Sicilian, c takes, knight takes d4, knight f6, knight c3. We see the Dragon variation with g6, so named because the bishop is like a fire-breathing dragon sometimes along this diagonal. Bishop e3 was played, bishop g7. Some of us may have tried the Dragon at some point and perhaps got frustrated being hacked on the h file with such moves like h4, h5 and white castling queenside. But in chess there is a lot of resources available for both defense and attack, and sometimes combining defense and attack and counter-attack. And let's see, so White is testing the Dragon setup with this fearsome variation. He's going to play f3 now, so that signifies queen d2 and castling queenside. Black castles, queen d2, the natural battery to exchange off the defensive bishop and then pursue a ruthless plan to open the h-file and checkmate black. Knight c6, bishop c4, which pins the f7 pawn, which in some ways can sometimes make this plan even more effective without that fg being taken away as a resource, because that pins f7 pawn. Bishop d7, the bishop drops back to b3 without waiting for knight e5 here. Queen a5, and now we see White playing h4, not casting queenside yet. Rook fc8, and here not casting queenside. And let's have a quick check on Livebook. Casting queenside in this position is actually the most popular by far. So this early h5, it seems a dangerous thing to do anyway. Why not just play it now, you might ask? Well, black just took that, and now White castles queenside. I think we've just simply transposed into a very popular position. It looks absolutely standard so far for what you'd expect. Knight e5. This is the standard plan to try and get rid of this bishop by putting a knight on c4, often expecting it just to be taken off with that bishop on b3. Now we see knight de2. There may have been a great game of Anatoly Karpov which might have influenced this, where Karpov once beat the Dragon by making c3 a bit safer and then pursuing his plan. It's actually quite a rare move in this position. The move which seems to be the most popular is actually knight d5 in this particular position, which is supposedly about equal, the evaluation, generally about equal. After that we have bishop h6 with 12 games and g4 12 games, but there's 28 games from this position, this exact position with knight d5. Knight de2 is quite a rare move. Okay, is there any real issue with this? Well, let's put on a Kibitzer and see actually if there's any also a latent threat from White. Knight d5 is still perhaps an idea for black. Black played bishop e6, and here again knight d5 might be a good idea in this position, but White didn't want to exchange off queens, it seems. If White plays knight d5, In fact, black might be doing okay here apparently, because he can take on d5, and if bishop takes, rook c7, and maybe it's not so clear, you know, without the queens, is black really got an attack now? He's just lost his h-pawn. You really need perhaps the queen to facilitate this attack, you know, exchanging off and trying to create threats. It seems the steam's really gone out of white's position, so maybe that's why knight d5 wasn't really liked here. So white actually played king b1, and now we see knight c4, utterly thematic move still, getting rid of that potentially dangerous light square bishop. Bishop takes c4, rook takes c4. And now white played g4, perhaps hoping that knight f6 will be played. So if knight f6, white could carry on perhaps with things like bishop d4, or maybe even bishop h6. Bishop h6 looks like a thematic approach, and the game can carry on, and it would potentially be quite dangerous for black. But here is where we have to question the actual resources in the position, and I wonder if you can spot what Chris Ward played in this position if I give you 10 seconds starting from now, or you might want to pause the video. Okay. Is it as easy as just opening up the H file to make black? Well, not in this particular position. There's a fantastic move available to black. It's knight g3, deflecting the defensive knight away from c3. What on earth does white want to do against this? Well, let's see. If he refuses to take that knight, let's give white a move. Say rook h2. What could happen on rook h2? Black could play knight takes e2. Now knight takes e2, let's say. And in this position, rook b4 is a double attack on b2 and a2. We've got all the guns firing on these two squares. What does white actually do here? It seems a very, very bad position indeed. There's no way of defending both squares, so that doesn't seem possible. And if queen takes e2, that looks to be asking just to be slaughtered with rook takes c3. So in this situation, what does white do with this knight? He felt compelled to take it. It looks like, oh dear, what's happened here? This doesn't seem an easy attack. What about, okay, bishop h6, let's have another go. Bishop h6. In this position, if bishop h6, leaving that knight on g3, black has, for example, rook takes c3 is a strong move. You might wonder, well, what's going on here? What about knight takes g3? Let's have a look at knight takes g3. Well, mate in 2, ouch. Rook takes c3 has knocked out the a2 defense. So black's actually threatening a2 here. Mate in 2. So that's no good. Bishop h6 for rook takes c3. If knight takes c3, bishop takes c3 again, just on a2. Now let's see, queen takes c3, queen takes a2, king c1, and that horrible knight on g3 forks the king and queen with knight e2 check, winning the queen. Ouch. End of game. So that's no good either. So rook takes c3 is an absolute crusher here. This knight is actually affecting king safety here on g3. There doesn't seem to be anything else apart from taking the knight, so it's taken. And now we see rook takes c3 anyway. So unveiling that attack on a2. White tried here b3. It looks fairly hopeless, this position, because it looks as though to play such a move, you're weakening a lot of the dark squares. Black now just builds up. With rook ac8, there might technically have been a better move there, but this looks very strong because it's just threatening all sorts of nasties. In this position, white tried rook c1. Can you guess the move now which Christopher Ward played in this position? If I give you 10 seconds starting from now, or you might want to pause the video. Wonderful move. Bishop takes b3 is played, destroying white's king safety completely. What a fun opening to play. Wow. Now let's see how to take this bishop. If a takes, let's have a look at a takes. Well, either a takes or c takes still run into the same resource. I hope you can spot it. Can you see it? I hope so. Rook takes b3 check. Look at that coordination on the a1 square. It's lethal. White has to resign here. He's been mated the very next move. After c takes, it's mate in 1. Queen a1 is mate. In the game continuation, it was very much the same, just the c pawn taking, actually. That was just very close to the game continuation. We still have rook takes b3. The only difference here is white can delay a little bit with with queen b2. And now it's still a mate in 2 with taking king a1 and then queen takes a2, for example. So one small inaccuracy and white was obliterated. And that fantastic resource in this position shows that maybe the dragon is playable at certain levels. Fischer may have underestimated the resources of this opening. It seems to be very, very dangerous if the fire-breathing dragon can coordinate with the queen like this. Spectacular demonstration of the Sicilian Dragon. Comments or questions on YouTube? Thanks very much.